have been through loss or grief or a difficult time, you have realized that community is everything. There's absolutely no way I could have gotten through losing Bob if I didn't have an incredible community of friends and family who rallied around me.
Oh, you are speaking truth there. In 2022, comedian and favorite TV dad Bob Saget died in an Orlando hotel room after performing at a stand-up comedy act. His death caught everyone off guard, no one more so than his wife, Kelly Rizzo. She's joining us today to talk about her own journey, and you really do have a desire to help others going through grief. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So that's, you know, it's been 3 years now,
Yeah.
and I think people think, you know, that the initial shock is what they need to rally around their loved one or someone who's lost somebody, but really 3 years out, you're still going through the grieving process.
Yeah, and it just kind of evolves and morphs and changes over time and ebbs and flows, as you know. You know, you can have a month that's great and then another month, you know, even 2 years down the road where you're like, where did that come from?
Yep,
It just kind of hit you out of nowhere. I was very fortunate, as I mentioned in that video, to have an incredible community that even after the initial shock were still checking in on me and making sure I was okay. But what I've learned over the last few years is that not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And I have so many people who, let's say, have watched my videos and they're like, these videos are so helpful because, like, I don't really have anyone that's still there for me. And I'm like, oh, geez, like that's not okay. We have to do something about that.
And that's why you're starting your own community when it comes to
Yes.
Comfort Club, which I think is just such an amazing idea, because as you're talking about, people can be so lonely in the experience. Even if you have a lot of friends, they don't always understand exactly what you're going through.
Well, and that's the thing. You can be surrounded by people who have never really gone through grief. And as you know, like when you're not in the club, you don't really get it. And then once you're in the club, it's a whole new world that kind of opens up to you. And then you can also see who else really gets it and who doesn't. And I just realized that there, you know, of course there's support groups and there's, you know, wonderful like grief support groups for people, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit more immersive where it's creating an online community, but then also I have really special guests come in. You know, last month I had Katie Couric, and this month I have Megan McCain, you know, people who have also gone through it, who have a story to tell. And unlike a podcast where it's kind of a one-way street, you could just listen to the conversation, this is interactive. So my members in Comfort Club can actually ask questions of these guests, which is pretty unheard of. So,
well, and this, along with the podcast you do, Comfort Food, I love that you have the food component to it, because I think there's people who either stop eating when they're grieving and they need to be reminded you need to still nourish yourself, or you find comfort in the food, right? And that's part of the supportive nature of it. So talk about how that plays into it.
So, you know, as you could see from, let's say, my Instagram videos, I was always in the food space. And then when everything happened with losing Bob, I was like, how can I tie in what I'm passionate about and what I know a lot about, which is food, to this world of grief? And then I used food and comfort food, you know, my guests' favorite comfort food, as a way of making the conversation around grief a little bit less heavy. Because, you know, if they're eating a grilled cheese while they're talking about something that's really heavy, it just makes it a little bit more palatable.
It does. It really does.
No pun intended.
You know, we're showing some clips too of John Mayer and Amanda Klutz.
Speaking of grilled cheese, that was Amanda Klutz. That was her comfort food,
These are also people who've dealt with loss. John Mayer recently on Instagram had this post about the Palisades fire and things that he had taken and what they meant to him. And you commented on that post saying how heartbreaking it was for you to go through and get Bob's glasses and things like that. So these other big events that happen in our lives can re-trigger the grief.
Yeah, and especially when you're confronted with the possibility of losing something else that's very important to you. And, you know, Bob and I, we had a very close call with the Getty fire years ago. And so I was on high alert already. And so I was kind of planning what stuff I needed, because I did need to evacuate. So I was planning what stuff to take. And the first thought is, what is irreplaceable? And to me, that was Bob's stuff. And so, you know, I couldn't grab everything because I still have a ton of his clothes, but I grabbed, you know, a handful of his clothes, some bags of his stuff, and the guitar that John Mayer gave us for our wedding. So he was kind of lumped into that as well. And then I'm sure John grabbed the guitar that we gave him of Bob's, because he said that that was one of his most valuable possessions. So
Just full circle.
Yeah, it really was.
Amanda Klutz is someone else I've gotten to know, you've gotten to know really well. She obviously lost her husband as well. I think it's so important that people do see that there can be love on the other side and that that's a good thing. There's a lot of haters online that have judgments about moving on and moving forward. But I know from my own experience and my mother's experience losing her husband, who she loved deeply, moving forward is such an important piece of it.
Yeah, and anyone who's judgmental about it has never gone through it.
Right.
So once you go through it and you get it, then there's just no room for judgment. I mean, there shouldn't be anyway.
Right.
But if you've really experienced it, then you understand that, you know, it is normal and it's different for every person. Some people feel ready 6 months later, some people never feel ready, and that's okay.
Both are okay.
Right, both are okay. And I have been very fortunate that I would say 99.99% of people have been online people have been very supportive. 100% in my life, which is what matters. The most important to me was Bob's daughters. As long as I had their blessing, I was okay with it. So if they were okay with it, then I was okay with it.
Well, it's good to see you happy, which doesn't mean you're over your grief, but
of course, no, they live simultaneously.
Together.
They live together forever. That, you know, neither one of them, they're not mutually exclusive. So yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
really
you so much for
appreciate it.
having
Such
me.
an important conversation, and can't wait to check out Comfort Club.
Thank you. Yes.